Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Tennis Fans podcast. This is Tuck, and this is Tree. Today we have our very first guest on the podcast, our friend Chris. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Tree. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Today, since we have Chris on the show, we figure it's another very good tennis story to add to our channel. A very interesting one indeed. So, yeah, Chris, can you give our audience a little bit of background about yourself, how you started tennis, your career, so on and so forth?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thanks, Tree and Tuck, just for having me. It's an honor to be here, just to share my story with everyone. So my name's Chris Chan. I've been playing tennis basically ever since I came out of my mother's womb. Basically, like, I started when I was around 5 years old.
6 months.
Yep. Or since I knew how to walk. Actually, first I started playing badminton, and then.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then I transitioned over to playing tennis. Didn't really get a full-time coach until maybe like 6 years old or so. And then from there, was just kind of fooling around playing with my parents until maybe 10 years old or so. And then from there, I actually kind of got serious. My parents got me maybe one or two coaches, and actually had like steady practice partners that I played with throughout the week. And then from there, starting at 10 years old, I started playing in the junior tournaments. So actually I was a lot better of like a tennis player comparatively when I was in like maybe my 10s and 12s. I was kind of like almost like a counterpuncher kind of play style. So that kind of play style, it's very effective like in the juniors, like when you're younger, right? Like in the 10s and 12s, and but then like as you move up in the 14s, like kids start growing hair on their legs, start getting stronger, like getting those growth spurts, and then it's a lot harder to kind of play that like counterpuncher play style.
But when I started playing tennis with you, that's when I was just finishing high school. So when I was 18, I think maybe you were 17 at the time. Yeah. You still have that like counterpuncher play style, or did you like develop weapons as well? Because I remember you hit it with a lot of like spin and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was a lot of spin. So, like Tree, I'm sure you remember, like, my forehands used to just be super like loopy, top spin.
Top spin.
Yeah, I didn't really have too many weapons. Just, I guess my main weapon was my speed and consistency.
Yeah.
Like almost like a Michael Chang back in the day.
Yeah. And the one thing I always want to ask you, because me and Tuck, like we picked up tennis so late during our life. Mm-hmm. I didn't start playing until I was like 15 years old. Yeah. And he started playing when he was 10. But by then when you were 10, you said you already playing tennis for like when you were like for 4 years already, right?
Yeah.
So like, what was that development like when you start playing in a junior? Because like I said, we didn't play competitive tennis at all, but it sounded like you start playing tournaments and everything like that. Like, how did that kind of like the mentalities aspect of it, as well as like the training aspect of it? Like, how did you able to just kind of talk about like how you play against other people, how you develop the game plan? You say like your defensive style. Mm-hmm. Was it a lot of pressure on you as a junior? And what was that like?
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember my very first tournament. Actually, it was a long time ago, but so I was obviously like unseeded going to the tournament.
Yeah.
And my parents signed me up for it and everything. And then so there were these two players. I think they were like the first and second seed. And then everyone was like, "Oh yeah, these guys, they're going to be the ones that are going to make it to the finals. Like no one else can beat them or anything."
Yeah.
And then I was like, "Yeah, I'll give it my best shot. Like I can probably hang with them."
Yeah.
And then I remember just getting owned by like the second seed. So that was probably in like maybe the quarterfinals or so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think. Yeah.
But then as over time you start like to build it, and then you become better and you know how to deal with like tournament pressure and stuff. Like
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the first tournament was definitely the toughest. Like I hadn't built up that kind of like match mentality yet, right?
Yeah.
But then you obviously develop that over time. You kind of learn how to deal with the nerves, and yeah, I think it's just basically mileage. Like the more matches you play, the more used to.
Do you feel like you had to make a lot of changes to like the way you played, or do you just feel like it's just more of like your mentality that kind of just changed over time, rather than like physically changing like your style of play or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's more like a mentality thing. So, yeah, obviously the more matches you play, like the more accustomed to it you get. Yeah, there's no real way around it. I feel like it's just
because you brought up a very interesting aspect of it is like you can get away back in the junior day with like playing defensive and like counter puncher. So like that's what I meant to ask is like how did you grow into that counter puncher game? Is all junior kid is counter puncher, or is that something that molded you into like the player that you were? You see what I mean? Because like some kid grow out of it and all of a sudden they become junior and they're what is it like? Keegan Smith. Yeah. So like he was a junior at some point in his career. And then he grow and then he become like a servant attacking style of player. So like was what during your junior day was it all like counter puncher just trying to like out rally each other?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like two factors for me. Like for one of the factors, like when you're in that age division, like 10s and 12s, even for like the junior open players, right? Like the best strategy is just to get the ball in. Like when you're that young, because there were kids that I remember I would beat them in like the 10s and 12s just by getting it in, and they would be kind of like swinging like super hard, but they would be going for their shots. But they'd just be missing more than I would miss. So that's why I would.
Basically, what you're saying is like kind of like the younger they are, it's just more like they're at that point like they're just developing their strokes and all that stuff, and it's just like you're trying to get like one more ball in or something like that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But then I remember playing like the same kids maybe in like the 14s or 16s, and then by then, it'd be tough. It'd be tough for me to like kind of keep up because I would still be playing that consistency game, but they would be like running me off the court. And then like the second factor, I think is probably with coaching. So I remember I think probably the most influential coach that I had growing up, like who kind of molded my play style. He kind of taught me to have that super loopy ball that we talked about.
It's Guy Fritz.
No, it's not.
We'll get to the Guy Fritz part. Okay. Who's it? Sorry.
It's not good. This coach so he started off teaching me with like almost having like a close to Western grip, and then he would teach me to kind of like almost lean back. Like, as if you remember back then, even when we first started playing, like when I was 18 or so. I'd always be on my back foot. It seemed just spinning, hitting super high loopy balls.
And I remember, most of the picture that you have, and when you were a junior, you can kind of see it too, like leaning back and like try to put a lot of spin in the ball. Yeah. It's funny because like when I was just starting to play tennis, every single time I hit the ball, like way over the fence or like a little high, my coach is always like, you know why you always like the balls go high like that is because you always lean back. Don't lean back. But that's something that was kind of like instilled to you by your coach to kind of like develop that game style. Interesting.
Yeah. I remember always kind of like leaning back in order to even hit like a neutral shot.
Oh, interesting.
But so even in like the 10s and 12s. So like I said, that was probably my peak. I was probably ranked maybe top 20 in SoCal.
Oh, wow.
In the 10s and 12s.
In the 10s.
And then like, I remember in like the 12s and maybe 14s, I got invited to what's called zonals. So that's when they pick like the top maybe 5 or 6 kids in that age division. And then you play different other zones, like there's SoCal, North Cal, and then, different states as well. You all meet up in this one area and it's kind of like team tennis, right? Like in high school.
Interesting.
Just play each other.
Yeah.
So as I grew older in like the 16s and 18s, my ranking kind of dropped. like I was still probably like maybe top 100.
And was that because like, your competitor or like or the junior kid, like you mentioned, they just got bigger and they developed some sort like a little bit of a weapon? Is that why?
Yeah, I think that's the main reason.
Oh wow. Okay.
Like once you get to that level and that age, like just getting it in, it'll only get you so far. Like you have to develop like bigger and bigger weapons.
So would you change if you had a chance? Like would you if you had to go back then and kind of like do it differently, would you have done so?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think so. Yeah, for sure.
And what would be sort of like, so let's say like if you were to choose, like what would be the ideal sort of style you would think you'd want to go for if you were given the chance to kind of go back in time?
Yeah, probably say like an all-around player. Because I remember growing up, like I never had any volleys or like any that much feel. Well, my feel was okay, but I had no net game at all. Like I remember I would hate playing doubles. I would hate coming into the net because like I knew my volleys weren't up to the level of like my ground strokes. I think that's kind of a common problem that juniors run into today.
Especially, I think like especially for me, like I'm kind of like I started fresh again like 2 years ago. Like we kind of mentioned that, and like even like right now, like I'm not super comfortable like moving to the net at all. Like that's just not part of like something that I'm super comfortable with, and I think like that's not like a common thing for people to kind of just like go and practice in their net game, So it's just like I think it's pretty common for to just not be comfortable with it.
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of like the last things that like a player develops like on their track to becoming like a well-rounded player.
I mean, I guess for like the larger audience out there would like either like young junior or parents who have kids who are young junior, something to keep in mind, right? Like you want to develop all the shot for your kid just because you as a junior or your kid who's a junior who's really good, who's now a puncher, and getting result at that point in time doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate. So coming from you, I mean, like you would have done it differently, focusing on doing this stuff, developing more of a weapon as you transition to like you're 16, under 16 and under 18.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of think about like the big picture, like also having a coach that thinks about like the future progression, who will work with you to like kind of plan out that kind of progression. Is very important. Because you definitely need to develop weapons like forehand, serve, in order to really get to the top levels. And then also another thing I would definitely work on is my serve more. Going out to serve just baskets by yourself is pretty boring, to be honest. I'm sure most people would agree. But honestly, it's like one of the most important things you can do.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I think a majority of people out there agree too. Because like when you play tennis, right, you're looking forward to like rallying back and forth, the feel of hitting the ball. But like who would want to go out there and just serve basket? But those are like, I would think those are like the very basic foundation that anyone would need in order to develop like a good serve or anything in your game. There's one thing I want to talk about in terms of Chris is like your experience with Guy Fritz. So I want to tell us about the story about you and Guy Fritz and who is this man as the father of? Who is his offspring?
So yeah, I started working with Guy Fritz probably when I was 16 or 17 years old. So pretty late.
16, 17. Okay.
It's pretty late in my tennis career. Back then, I remember just going to his house. So
and you were one of his protege. The next.
I was one of his students. So I don't know about.
How many?
That's all I can say.
How many people? Like, how many students did he have, or like, was it?
I think he had plenty of students.
Group lesson, right?
No, not group lesson. There's always private lesson. But yeah, I mean, I didn't get to meet all the students, but I feel like every time I went there, he'd always have someone for me to hit with. Like that was my level or like a little better than. But yeah, so I started probably around 16 or 17. Went to his house. Lived in Rancho Santa Fe at the time. I think he's still there now. Then, it's like a huge house. He's got a tennis court in his backyard, and I remember just this little kid this little 10-year-old kid. And he's like, "This is my son, Taylor."
Oh, God. Taylor Fritz.
Yeah, Taylor Fritz. And
What rank is he right now?
Taylor?
so it was 5.
He was top 10. I think he may be out of it now just because he just lost in Indian Wells.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was top 5 at one point.
Wow. Damn, Chris.
Yeah. He lost in Indian Wells, so he dropped some points, but
yeah, so I was probably around 17 at the time, and Taylor was maybe 11 or 10 or so, and he was
beating him.
Well, no, I think we were probably around even at that time, and I was a good, like 7, 8 years older than him. So yeah, that's just how good he was.
All jokes aside, like that shows like how good Taylor Fritz is, right? Like as an 11 to be able to hang with like a 17-year-old, that's pretty crazy. Like what was so different like about him? Because I mean, I feel like when I was 15 and I play against my brother who was 10, right? And then as we grow towards like I would be 17 and he would be 12, there's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But then you were 17, he was 11.
Yeah.
What was it like? Like he was able to handle your pace?
Yeah, he was. Honestly, it just felt like I was just playing another like 17-year-old, like across the. Because I mean, he's a big guy. Like even back then, when he was 10 or 11, he was already maybe like 5. I don't know. I want to say like 5'7" or something like that.
Oh, geez.
Would get older and bigger players to hit with him as well. But yeah, helps to have a tennis court in your backyard.
I think like getting down to the business. I think the very big topic that we want to chat with you today is about your recent journey to rediscover your forehand. So, it's your story. I'll let you start.
So I want to say around maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, my forehand just started on like a steady decline, just going down, and right now it's probably like at its bottom, at its worst point. So yeah, I'm probably around 5 years ago. Like I was just hitting at the Miramar tennis courts that I always used to play at, and then I'm not at it still to this day. Like I still don't know how it began, but I remember back then there were a few forehands that I hit where I was just basically coming over the ball, and then it would just go straight into the net. But it wouldn't happen like every time. But now, like today, it's gone to the point where like almost all my forehands are like that. And yeah, like I still don't know the root cause. It might just be, from not playing as much. Like back in the juniors, I used to play almost every day.
Yeah.
And then, like after I graduated college, I just kind of stopped maybe playing like twice a week.
Yeah, once.
And it was just maybe playing doubles, not really practicing my strokes at all.
Well, I mean, I would like to apologize on behalf of everyone that played with you on the tennis court. I mean, I only started again recently, but I think part of the reason maybe you lost your forehand is because you had to play down to our level.
Yeah, I think like I mean, no, it's true. Like I mean, the biggest lesson for everybody out there is like if you're a good player, don't play with worse players. I'm sorry. No, you should cut it. But you kind of laugh about it, but it's kind of true in a sense, like, right? Like, but I mean, I don't want to get away from the facts. I don't want to sugarcoat it or like saying the incorrect thing, but I think it's true, and I would be willing to admit that I was one of those people that caused your forehand to decline because I was not so good back then, and it's okay, right? Like because when you were we talk about this sometimes when we would like play tennis together, you had an option of like, oh, you went to either you were gonna go play for the team at the university or you weren't, but I think you picked the route of that you weren't gonna do it, so you're still gonna play tennis but more recreationally. So yeah, I mean, like, maybe go off topic or not, but like, was it because you just kind of like burned out, Chris, or like was it just like you don't really want to play more like competitive tennis?
Yeah, I think for that, yeah. So basically, I feel like I was kind of burnt out at the time.
Yeah.
Like one from just playing tournaments and practicing almost every day from when I was 10 to 18. And then yeah, another factor was just to kind of focus on school.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just didn't really want to play like competitively anymore.
Yeah. So when you took that route, I mean, like, obviously there are the player that you hit with, but the primary group that you hit with was like me, Long. I think primarily me first, and then we started going to the community college near our area, and then we started playing more. And I think you were starting out. You were the best player at that school, like at that campus, where it was like a community, but you were one of the, I wouldn't say one of, but like the best player there. And then every single week, really, like, you went from an individual that would train every single day, having coaches play tournament, to really just playing recreationally. I think max like 3 times a week there, or sometimes even 1 time. And when we go out there, we don't really, again, like going back to it's kind of connecting to what we talked about earlier, training the specific. Yeah. You kind of get away from that, and you're just playing more for fun. And to a point where we just like playing just to try to win, to beat each other. And like, I think we were not at your level, so most of the time you were just kind of like slowing the ball down, moonballing it, because you would know eventually we would miss, those kind of things. And I think over time it kind of takes an effect. That's my prediction. I don't know how you feel about that.
So I mean, like, I was gonna go off of that actually, because like I was thinking, I'm obviously I didn't play with you guys for like before that, but I was just thinking like, like right now when we're trying to change up the way that we train, right? What we were talking about recently, like have some sort of objective. Like we need to be able to kind of hit cross court, blah blah blah. But then like before that, we would just kind of play for fun, and this most of the time I would say like we hit down the middle, right? And then so like what happened I think was that with Chris, like before when we just keep hitting down the middle, like Chris would kind of just it wouldn't benefit him. Yeah, and so he would just kind of like be in the middle, and then just eventually just kind of feel like stationary.
There's a variety factor, and Chris know one of the factor, and I'll let him speak to it. But that was the big thing, because he was so good that he would, like, his anticipation skill was better than a majority of us. He know where the ball is gonna go, so he was not gonna you were able to do it. So that's when, like, I think the footwork and then like the techniques, you kind of like massaging it a little bit more. But I think another big one is like nobody would hit you.
Yeah, I think honestly one of the big things, I will say, like, I remember being pretty cocky at the time. And like I wouldn't actually hit my forehand a lot of the time. I would just kind of slice the ball in.
Yeah.
Just be playing around, drop shotting, lobbing, just running people around, honestly. Yeah, but I think that was a big thing. Like, if you don't use it, you lose it, apparently. It's kind of weird though that, you would think growing up playing so much from, 5 to 18 that muscle memory would be ingrained in you and you wouldn't be able to lose it, right? But I mean, apparently it's not going to happen to everyone, but it can happen. If you stop like training every day, and then just like fool around on the tennis court, then, you can lose that muscle memory.
Can you kind of tell the audience specifically, like technically, like what have gone wrong, Chris? Like, what do you think have gone wrong in terms of like the stroke itself?
Yeah, so honestly, like even today, I don't even know like what's going on really. I think it's just such a mystery to me. So now I'm kind of thinking that, because looking back on kind of like a recent video, or a video from maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, back when my forehand was at least decent, right? Like I still kind of had like kind of a weird hitch to it.
A hitch?
Yeah. So that's kind of let me try and explain like the core of the problem. So when I hit my forehand, it's there's like a weird hitch right before I hit the ball. So the best way I can explain it is, so if you try and hit a forehand right now, during the take back, right? Like you'll see that your wrist is completely relaxed, right?
Yep.
And then after contact, it's still relaxed. And then at some point, your wrists will activate when you flip it over, right?
Yep.
So the problem that I'm having is that activation part. I'm doing it even before I make contact with the ball. So it's not relaxed at all. So like I activate it and it pronates like this. So it pronates and then I'm making contact with the ball with the racket face
Down.
Oh.
And it's just like
it's an automatic like muscle memory kind of thing. I got so desperate that, I posted to the tennis forum just to try and give any help that I can with like videos of me hitting it. And also on there, I explain like so in the beginning of the hitting session, like any hitting session, it's decent. Like I'm somewhat relaxed, but then as the hitting session goes on, I start pronating more and more.
Is it because you tense up, or is it?
Yeah, I think it's because I get more and more tense during the hitting session. And then it gets so bad to the point where, like at the end of the hitting session, I can't even bounce the ball properly. Like, I'll be bouncing the ball with my hand pronated like this, and the racket face will be kind of like this. Yeah, so.
And a lot of the comments, would you say, was helpful? And some of them was quite funny.
They're pretty brutal.
Yeah. Nothing short of a witch doctor is needed.
Yeah, I think a lot of the comments were trying to be helpful, at least. Like there were one or two, troll comments. I think most people on there are pretty good. They try and help at least.
Yeah. And what have you done specifically? Like, did you created like a list of things that you need to do to like try to fix it, or?
Yeah, so I created basically a Google Doc, like I started it in like 2021, and just kept adding to the list of things that I would try. So some of the things I've tried, like I guess one of the things that came to my mind is that it's not actually like or it's more of like a muscle problem, like a flexibility kind of thing, right? So like in my mind, it was like because my forearm isn't flexible enough, so that's why it's kind of tensing up. So one of the things I tried was just using my massage gun like every night and just, going to town on it. And then also just stretching it like this, like on the floor like that. Just trying to get it as flexible as I can. But I don't think it's a flexibility issue. I've tried, I feel like I've tried everything under the moon. Right now, the thing that I'm trying is just getting reps in, just repetition. So I just go to the wall about an hour a day, and I'm just trying to find it back. Yeah.
Searching for like something deep within that was there, and then you're just trying to rediscover that old technique, or was it something that you have always done since you were a junior?
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Like, I feel like growing up, my forehand was like super whippy, as you probably remember.
Yeah, I remember.
And I can't really remember how I used to hit it. It was probably like a really niche way to hit it. Like not like no coach would probably try and teach it.
And I want to make sure like I state this is like your forehand, because I play you before all this happened. I want to make sure everybody knows is that, and I think you start playing back, so you haven't seen like the real Chris forehand. It was actually very good.
No, I mean, like, yeah, I've had glimpses of it. What is your kind of current goal with the forehand, right? Because like, it's like, are you trying to find a way back to your old forehand, or are you trying to just like basically just rediscover the forehand in general, like just try a completely different route
so either finding your old forehand or start something new
is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
Right now, honestly, I'm just trying to get rid of the hitch because, because if you've seen me hit recently, it's just like, when I try to make contact, it's just
like
I just pronate so much that I can't even get the ball over the net sometimes. But I think recently with with the wall. I think it's actually helping, just getting those repetitions in. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
It's kind of hard, right? Because we actually kind of talked about this in the first few episodes. I remember we want to help Chris, but everybody's built differently. As we talked about this, like people, tennis, everybody can teach you, okay, this is how you should hit a forehand. But at the end of the day, like people are different. People left eye dominant, right eye dominant, all those kind of stuff. So you just have to like obviously you're working hard to find it back, but everybody's different.
Yeah. Another thing I will say is like growing up, like I never really thought about, the strokes, like the forehand.
Yeah, it's kind of
like honestly, since I started tennis so young, like I never really thought about what grip I used. Like I didn't even know what grip I used back then until like I actually thought about it. And now
that's interesting
because it's just especially when you start so young, it's just muscle memory.
Right.
Like,
and I think that's like the really tough part because like you've kind of like ingrained it within yourself as opposed to like somebody like they're kind of starting fresh and like you're kind of just like trying out all these different things. So like it's like tough to kind of make that change from like what you're kind of just completely like just your body is used to, like how it fits with your own body up.
Yeah, I want to go off of what Chris just said. I think it's a very good point comparing Chris' situation to your situation, because he actually started playing seriously again within the last 2 years, you remember.
Yeah.
And since then, I think Tuk is very aware of like the type of grip, because he actually went on internet looking at it, those kind of things. He actually learned about it. He's aware of it. Whereas in your situation, I think you start learning tennis young. Mm-hmm. And back then, like you're a kid, you're not like, usually even myself as a kid, I don't pay attention. I was kind of thinking about it's just so natural.
Yeah.
So now I'm like trying to like rediscover like, wow, when I was like 12 years old, what kind of grip was I using?
Right.
Like fast. I think that is a different situation. That's why I'm saying like different situation, different people, different body. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right now, I'm just trying to rediscover like. So, I do remember back then I probably used like almost a semi-Western to like a hybrid grip, like between semi-Western and Western.
Yeah.
Just because that's kind of what like feels right. But the thing is, I really wish I took, more videos back in the day to look back on and see like, oh, that's how I used to hit my forehand.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like the fortunate part of like right now. This is like everything's like so accessible.
Yeah.
That's sure. We literally go out there and we like record so much of ourselves, like not just to like post or whatever, but it's like to really analyze our.
Yeah, it's the technology nowadays. Like you see, like kids going to Miramar or like Alex Pramud, like whenever they go and they like practice, they all have like an iPad recording and analyzing everything to a T. But I think like the answer is we don't know, because I mean, like if anybody of our audience know that can help Chris out, feel free to comment. Anybody who's very good technically, a witch doctor, or Carlos, please help our friend.
Please, Harry. He easily has one of like the best forehand right now on the tour.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a story for the audience. Like, I think it was 3 or.
I know exactly.
Yeah.
Where you're going.
I don't know where you're going with this.
3 or 4 years back, I was at Indian Wells.
Oh.
And this was when before Carlos, anyone knew who Carlos Alcaraz was. I think he was probably maybe 17 at the time, and I think he was just training with his coach Juan Carlos Ferrero there.
Yes.
And I asked Juan Carlos Ferrero for a picture, and not Alcaraz.
Really number one in the world right now.
If you're watching this, Carlos, I'm sorry, but please help me with my forehand. Listening to this.
No, that was funny, because I think that was a perfect time, because Juan Carlos, Juan Carlos, because Juan Carlos was number 1 in the world, but then he already retired for 6 years or something. And by that time, also like you ran into him in a perfect situation where you recognize him, where not a lot of people know who he is.
Yeah.
So you will recognize him, but the unfortunate part is like you don't know. You recognize the fact that he has a future number 1 that he was training. His forehand, I would say Juan Carlos is a complete player. Like, when you play virtual tennis or topspin, and there's like
The bars.
the bars, and then like the name would be pick server, or fantastic volleyer. Yeah, like Juan Carlos and Roger. Usually they would say they're like all rounder, but they call him Juan Carlos the mosquito, because he would like just be like a fly that just wouldn't get off of you, because he would get everything back and try to like beat you. Yeah, the mosquito.
For his speed being one of like his strong suits.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess that really transferred pretty well into his.
You can see a little bit of a glimpse in Carlos Alcaraz. You can see a little bit of a glimpse of Juan Carlos in Carlos Alcaraz, because the one thing Alcaraz has over Juan Carlos is he has the physique, he has the power, but Juan Carlos grinds for every ball. And that's what Alcaraz is doing. So like that alone in combination is like a perfect combination. He has the weapon, and he's also is be able to grind everything down. So yeah, that's why he's very good. Yeah. So Juan Carlos, please.
I mean,
My friend.
he chose you to take a picture with, over Alcaraz. So I mean, hopefully Juan Carlos listens in on this and helps Chris out.
I actually think what we would hope best to come out of this episode is that Juan Carlos sees this, and he would reach out to Chris or ask personally and ask Chris to be Carlos Alcaraz hitting partner every single tournament until Chris get his forehand back.
But then we're going back to the idea of,
I think
what if like Carlos has to play down?
Oh,
and then what is this?
What do you mean? You're giving me a little too much credit there.
Carlos has to play down, and eventually
He's gonna have that hitch.
a hitch.
Yeah.
It's like a virus. It's gonna transfer over to Carlos.
All right. But I mean, I guess that maybe just to kind of keep it a little bit shorter is like for me to transition to the question that what do you think? Like, who do you think on the tour? Yeah, no, from back then and now, as like the best forehand.
Yeah. So like I say Chris, because you don't have a forehand anymore. I think we can also comfortably say that. If you can steal one person's forehand from, you can choose anyone. Who would you take the forehand from, and bring it to you? And you only have one choice.
Just one?
Yes. And you only have one go.
No take back.
No take back.
I want to say Del Potro.
Ooh.
The hammer.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's definitely got that power.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
But honestly, I'm gonna go with Federer.
Wait, I just said no take back. Chris.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So Chris is gonna be.
I want to say.
Oh.
All right, fine. I'll stick with Del Potro.
Yeah, Del Potro is that's a good choice. Yeah.
I mean, I guess Del Potro, he's got a very interesting forehand.
Yeah, Del Potro.
It's you would call it conventional.
Yeah. It's
He almost has that like straight, like a straight arm.
Yeah, sure. I think what's interesting is that like what kind of like differentiates like a lot of players is like their own like sort of unique style. And I think with Del Potro is like he it's almost like a loop.
Yes, you should.
So that a whole lot of like just gravity.
Yeah. And with his name, his body is a perfect build for it. If there's one analysis on YouTube that I think is like very good to talk about like the Potro forehand, it's My Tennis HQ. There's one episode where Carousel specifically talk about the Potro forehand and how he tried to. It's very good.
Shout out to Caruso.
Yeah, it's a very good episode. Yeah, I already mentioned it. Yeah, but like he did a very good analysis of like the Potro forehand. I think it's a very good choice, Chris.
Yeah, but honestly, like without Del Potro's body, like I don't know how effective his forehand.
That's why I'm saying is like everybody again, right? I think it's so true that you develop your technique based on your body type.
Yeah.
Right? Like the reason why Sinner is so good is because of his technique and his body is very lengthy and kind of like nimble, that he's able to chase down everything. Like myself, I'm trying to learn like Yanni's technique. I wouldn't be good because I don't have the same body type. So it's like it's all to that. Yeah. So I think it's a good choice. Yeah, no approach for forehand. What about you?
You first.
You first.
Rock, paper, scissors.
All right. Whoever wins, go first.
No, that's how it works. You just go.
Diego Schwartzman.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah. I would like to have Diego Schwartzman forehand. I think it's a very solid forehand. And I think because I'm pretty much close to the same height that he is, I think it's a very effective shot. Very consistent. And he has a low sense of gravity, and he's developing his technique to accommodate for that. Yeah. So I would say for a lot of the folks out there who's like around my height, like 5'7", 5'9", 5'8", like take a look at Diego Schwartzman forehand. Like it's pretty good. Like it's very solid. It's dependable. He's not
it's not like a weapon.
He's not a weapon, but for me, I'm looking for solid, and I would say Diego Schwartzman. Yeah. So yeah, I like him as a player too. You know, like even though he's going through a little bit of like a slump right now because he had some good years before. But I think he's a very solid player. He's always have like a fighting spirit, and that's what I'm trying to develop my game to right now. But to have that solid, so I would say Diego. You know Diego Schwartzman.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
Yeah, he's a good player.
He's definitely got that like big loop.
Yeah,
very, very steady, consistent forehand.
Don't quote me on this because I read a lot about this in talk tennis. I've heard that he used a 28-inch racket. You know the standard tennis racket is 27. His racket is 28. Extended one. Yeah.
I don't know. With my choice, it's gonna be kind of tough. Kind of stuck between Alcaraz and Sinner. But if I had to just choose between the two, maybe a little bit biased, but Sinner, just because of like how much like whip he has on that forehand. I mean, if you saw like the recent match with like Taylor Fritz, I think like there's 4 different like points where like it was above like 90 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Which is insane. Like whenever he does feel it, like that thing flies.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how they like measure gun clock of like they hit the forehand is like 90s. I remember I went to Indian Wells recently and they have like a place where you can, I think it was like the place where you can go and test your serve, how fast it is. And I served like 60 miles an hour. Yeah. They're hitting forehand 90 miles an hour.
It's insane.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting choice because obviously, like, it's also like very different from like how I play as well. Like, I play with a lot of spin as opposed to like I feel like Sinner, he kind of like plays more flat. But I mean, if I had to choose, like his forehand is pretty great.
Glad you didn't pick Alcaraz because I feel like as of this point in time, everybody would pick Alcaraz to have that forehand. You know, one final note on my end is please, anyone out there, witch doctor, Carlos Alcaraz, Sinner,
Juan
Carlos Ferrero, Roger Federer, or
what do you do right now?
no, what do you do right now? Yes, or even tennis, Sandgren.
Oh, tennis.
Yeah, like help
Anyone.
please help my friend. We get this forehand back. Yeah, I want to close out with that.
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. This is our first episode with a guest on, and
I think we'll have Chris back for sure. Absolutely, when he finds his forehand again.
Yeah, we'll definitely have a follow up.
We'll have a follow up for sure. What, maybe 20 years from now?
Yeah, maybe 5 years from now.
We'll
Almost old. So, Chris.
We'll have a lot. We have Chris back. We have more guests on the show to tell their story, their background, and everything like that. But yeah.
Any last words, Chris, to the
People that are watching or and listening?
Yeah, just thanks for having me. I feel honored being the first guest on this podcast. And yeah, like Tree mentioned, if anyone is out there willing to lend a helping hand to a struggling tennis player in need.
Well, yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And I hope that you guys also have a wonderful week up ahead. This has been the 5th episode of the Tennis Phans podcast.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.